Chefs Without Restaurants, episode 48 with Phillip Dell.
I discovered that I was feeling much better by exercising. I parked like literally a mile away from work every day and had to truck myself in, and I started feeling a little better. I changed the way I started eating, and long story short, I lost about 100 pounds and went from a 44-inch waist to a 28. It was at that time, about 17 months later, that I opened up my own company called Sin City Chefs and started helping other people do the exact same thing that I did. Through Sin City Chefs, I was called by the Food Network and had my opportunity to compete on Chopped. Barbecue is something that I've been passionate about my entire life. When I was 8 years old, I had the pleasure of learning how to roast my first pig with my grandfather and my uncle. And that's kind of how, the fire started burning in terms of barbecue.
This is the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast with your host, Chris Spear. Each week, I'll be speaking with food entrepreneurs and people in the culinary industry. If you're interested in learning more about our organization dedicated to helping people build and grow their food businesses, look us up on the web at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Chefs Without Restaurants. Now, enjoy the show. On this episode, I have Chef Phillip Dell. Phillip is a barbecue competitor, a chef instructor, a chop champion, and so much more. I actually met Phillip when we were both at Johnson & Wales in Providence. At the time, he was studying to be a pastry chef, so I was surprised a few years ago when I reconnected with him via Facebook and saw that he was living in Las Vegas and was cooking barbecue. I think the main takeaway is that Phillip has really diversified and invested in himself as a brand. And especially during the time of COVID-19, it has been to his benefit to have a lot of different things working. So he has a personal chef business. He has a line of spices and sauces that he's working on. He does some consulting and some R&D stuff. So not just being tied to one restaurant or one project, he's really taken an overall approach to what the Chef Phillip Dell brand looks like. And I think anytime that you can kind of have a few different things going and invest in yourself that way, it seems to be a benefit. I know that it's a lot of work and very challenging, as I've even tried to do some of that myself. But I just think this is a really great conversation, and Phil is such an interesting guy and has done so many different things. And I think it's a great episode. So I hope you enjoy it, and please give us some feedback. We'd love to hear comments. Thanks to this week's sponsors, Tyler Wright, Danny Spletter, Ron Krieger, Cafe Bueno, Little Fig Bake Shop, Maryland Bakes, and the Savory Spoon Catering Company. If you want to support the show, our Venmo name is CHEFWORESTOS. If you enjoy the show, have ever received a job through one of our referrals, have been a guest, been given complimentary Chefs Without Restaurants swag, or simply want to help, it would be much appreciated. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend. Welcome, everyone. This is Chris with the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And this week we have Chef Phillip Dell. So Chef is a barbecue competitor, a chef instructor, a chopped champion, and many other things. I met Phil when we were in culinary school back in 1995 when he was studying to be a pastry chef. So welcome to the show, Phillip. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. Things are going as well as they could be right now. Some of my clients finally call me back, so we are ready to rock, and it's getting hot here in Vegas.
Yeah, I've never been out that way. I'll have to make it out sometime. How long have you been out in Vegas now?
I moved to Las Vegas in 2005 to help open up the Wynn.
Nice. So I guess where does it make sense to start your story? So the last time I actually saw you was in Providence when we were at culinary school, and I thought you were going to be a pastry chef. And now it's 20-something years later, and you're not a pastry chef and seemingly doing really well in the world of barbecue. So how did that happen?
So, when I moved to Las Vegas, like I said, in 2005 to help open the Wynn, I actually started there as a pastry chef. But I also started there morbidly obese. I had a 44-inch waist. I weighed 217 pounds. And during the opening process of Win, I discovered that I was feeling much better by exercising. I parked like literally a mile away from work every day and had to truck myself in, and I started feeling a little better. I changed the way I started eating. And long story short, I lost about 100 pounds and went from a 44-inch waist to a 28. It was at that time, about 17 months later, that I opened up my own company called Sin City Chefs and started helping other people do the exact same thing that I did. And at that point, that's pretty much when I got out of pastry full time. I still actually taught professionally for people that wanted to be pastry chefs. But I also helped people live a healthier lifestyle, I guess. And that's kind of how things evolved. Through Sin City Chefs, I was called by the Food Network and had my opportunity to compete on Chopped. Barbecue is something that I've been passionate about my entire life. In addition to always wanting to be a chef since I was 4 years old, I also lived kind of all the time around a grill or a smoker or a pit of some kind. When I was 8 years old, I had the pleasure of learning how to roast my first pig with my grandfather and my uncle. And that's kind of how, the fire started burning in terms of barbecue. I developed my own seasonings in the late 90s and took those to market as well. And some sauces and some glazes and some marinades. And that's pretty much how it started. When I moved to Las Vegas, I was recently divorced and just kind of wanted to start over. I took about a 10-year hiatus from the competition scene. After winning Chopped, my wife and I were redoing our backyard, and I bought a smoker, a Kamado, beautiful smoker. And ironically, one of my good friends was teaching a professional barbecue class that for people that like to compete. I went to the class, and when I got home, my wife looked right at me and she goes, "So when's the next competition?" And that's pretty much where it started back up again. And that was about 7 years ago. We've competed at least 50 times since then. We've done very, very well. And this year's been a little weird, but we just came back from a competition in Ogden, Utah. And we had a lot of things going up against us this contest, but we still walked away with a few prizes. So, once you get as you know, Chris, once you get kind of excited about something and you just have it in your blood, you find every way you possibly can to keep going. And that's what I do.
I'm sure it's like picking a favorite child, but do you have a favorite cut of meat or something to do for barbecue?
Well, I get that question a lot. Any possibility that I have, I love to smoke pigs. Like I said, I have a lot of really good memories with smoking pigs, but considering they're expensive and very cumbersome and you got to have a lot of people that eat them, ribs, I absolutely love to cook ribs. I have so many memories about ribs as well. Some amazing and some of them not so great, but it's just, in fact, we're debating right now. Because I travel a lot and I'm our busy schedules all the time, we haven't really celebrated Father's Day yet. So this weekend we're going to celebrate Father's Day and trying to decide if we're doing the barbecue thing or if we're going to do burgers and dogs this weekend. And then on the 4th of July, vice versa. Sometimes I have a pig roast on 4th of July. This year, we're not going to do that. We might wait till Labor Day. But ribs, definitely ribs.
So what do you do for business? What's the core of how you earn your living?
So I closed Sin City Chefs about 5 years ago and opened up CPD Enterprises LLC a few years ago. And it basically encompasses everything that has to do with food. I have such a broad range of abilities when it comes to food, both for research and development, to consulting, to menu development, cost analysis, helping people eat better one bite at a time, 10-course meals, it doesn't really matter. So I travel the world doing a lot of things when it comes to barbecue or when it comes to food in general. And that's pretty much how I make a living. I have clients that I cook for very regularly, but because of COVID, a lot of them have gone away. I recently had one come back, which is great. And I've got another client that has been with me off and on for the last 7 or so years. Helped that gentleman and his beautiful wife live a healthier lifestyle as well. And I have other people kind of managing some of those accounts for me so that I can travel the world and as my friend Harry Sui would say, share the love. So that's basically, if it has to do with food, I'm ready to go.
So you've really diversified, and it sounds like building a brand. I mean, I'm always kind of torn by like saying that like a person is a brand, but I mean, I think it makes sense. You kind of have your hands on a few different things, and I think it's smart to diversify.
Absolutely. Speaking of the branding and everything else, growing up, we of course had Paul Prudhomme to idolize after, and Julia Child. And if you notice those names, those were the brands. It wasn't. I mean, even Emerald to this day, is Emerald, but it's not necessarily the restaurant that's the brand; it's the name. And so, years and years ago, and by that standard, I would say probably 10 years ago, a very good, very successful businessman told me, it's great to have a business name, but Chef Phillip Dell is the brand, and you need to keep marketing that. And I didn't listen to him until about 5 years ago, and it started sticking. So that's what we're doing. And we have a lot of really cool things coming up.
Yeah. I think it's really hard sometimes when you start a business, you don't have the foresight as to where it's going to go. And you see so many people change the name of their business or change what their tagline is, not food, but I was thinking of like Just Cabinets, and you go in there and they have like couches and stuff. It's like, maybe you shouldn't have called yourself Just Cabinets,
Exactly.
So you said you had some customers who dropped off due to COVID. Do you know why? Is it because of a safety issue, like they didn't want you around? Or is it financial because maybe they were unemployed, or a combination of both? Because I'm just trying to talk to everyone about like where their business is and what's been going on.
For my clients, it was more a financial disposition, strategic. It wasn't a goodbye. It was, I'll see you later. And so I completely understand. They understand that, we as chefs always strive to give the best service, and we just want everybody to be happy. And so and safe, of course. And so they're all great. And so I can't wait for them to come back.
Talking about that, what did COVID do to food cost for you, especially things for like barbecue? I know so many of my friends who have food trucks. I have a couple of friends who have like barbecue trucks, and they're just talking about the cost specifically of like brisket and all that kind of stuff that used to be more reasonably priced. I'm sure you're seeing that. And how does that impact things?
We were fortunate in the fact that pretty much everything leveled out or stayed the same for a little while. As of late, meaning in the last month, that's when everything skyrocketed. We went from $249 for prime brisket to $699 for prime brisket. Or even worse. And I'm talking wholesale. So, into market, we're talking even more ridiculous. So it's been definitely a blow. It's one of those things where, I've been kind of helping another business. They call me up and ask me questions every once in a while, and a barbecue company. And they said, Chef, what should we do about this? And here's kind of my thought: stretch it out as far as you possibly can. If your number one item, say, is brisket, then don't lose brisket. But a lot of the times, and I think as chefs and as in the industry, people need to understand kind of where we're at. And it's sometimes a lot of things are out of our control. In fact, most of the time things are out of our control. And in this case, the price of brisket is way out of control. And so it's, for that gentleman, it's his number one selling item. So if he were to take that off his menu, that could completely destroy his business. However, by simply sending out a letter to his faithful guests and his new guests that are about to come and everything, just let them know, hey, and you could even just send out like, hey, what would you like us to do? Would you like us to keep it and raise the price temporarily and reassure them that this is just temporary, and then we'll bring it. We promise to bring it back as soon as we do. We're not greedy. We want you to be just as happy as we are. And that's what you end up doing. And he's doing an amazing job. And that's pretty much what we all have to do. It's adapt. Everybody has to adapt to what's going on right now. And I mean, everybody. That means us as the chefs and as the industry, and also to the customer, everybody. And then the wholesaler, everybody, absolutely everybody needs to take this hit at the moment. Just ride it out. We'll all come out more successful and happier in the end.
I think that's one of the big things is now it seems like the customer's getting a lot more insight into the food business than maybe they had before. I mean, the info was always there. we were always talking about it, but now I think it's very evident where the cracks in the whole food service industry were. I mean, food should not be inherently cheap and expensive, like there's a true cost to these things. And now even more so, and people, it's unfortunate because people have less money to spend. And I think a lot of people want to see less expensive food. And on our end, we have so much more elevated costs right now. And how you reconcile that, I think, is going to be tough. And I think for the first couple months, people have been understanding, but as it wears on, I mean, I think you're going to see in a month or so, people are going to not be spending as much money, maybe, if things haven't evened out. And I think we're going to have to keep our eye on it. And again, that's where I think diversification is a smart move.
A good example is this, and sometimes I get criticized for it, especially when I had the food truck. There are some people that say, oh, if your items aren't above $10, you're not a gourmet truck. And I don't believe that necessarily. I believe, and especially in this case, like for instance, tapas restaurants right now could crush it, meaning that they could do an amazing job. Why? Because you can get a smaller amount for a little less money. You're still getting some good food. You can try some new things, maybe be a little more adventurous than you used to be. Instead of just getting a big, huge pile of food for $20, you can now get 4 or 5 single items for $20. Now, I know that's a little harder on the staff. It's a little harder on the owner, mainly because that just means that their volume needs to increase, which, as I'm sure you know, is not always the case. If your number one selling items are only $3, man, in order to cover your costs, you're going to need to sell thousands of those things.
Yeah. I've decided in my business model, it wouldn't work trying to trade on volume, that I went high end, and it's what's worked for me, but I get nervous about that. I don't have the abilities. People say, well, you should pivot and start doing like in-home delivery meals. It's like, but now if I'm doing like $15, $20 meals to scale up, like then I need to go get a commercial kitchen. Then I need to hire staff. Then I need capital equipment, all these things I don't have. Like my business model was built on going to do a dinner for 10 and making $1,000 in a night. And now if I have to do 100 meals at $10 a head, I just can't do that, and hoping that my model continues to work for a while. But if you have a restaurant, yeah, I see what you're saying. And you got to be flexible, right? These restaurant owners have to be flexible. And I think that's flexibility and adaptability have been the words the past couple months.
That's one thing that I've absolutely loved seeing, during this whole thing when everybody was stuck at home or whatever, chefs were even busy, like restaurant owners. I have some chef acquaintances and friends that have restaurants that, they started doing that take home boxes of a few menu items. And then they would do a class online, a Zoom, or, they did it live on Facebook or whatever, so that people could actually see it happening. And I think that was just outstanding. I think that's great. I had the pleasure of doing that myself. People were like, hey, chef, that bread you posted, do you have a recipe? Well, I'll be honest, a lot of times I don't use recipes. However, I'm happy to come up with one real quick for you, send it off, and they're like, okay, well, this scares me. And I'm like, okay, well, let's pick a time, let's pick a date, and let's do it together, And I think that was an opportunity for people to learn even more and to get excited about really how it works, to get to know the people that are actually making the food for them every day.
I've always found my biggest successes came from my engagement in my community. I mean, you seem like someone who's very engaged with your people too. I'm always so surprised and disappointed at businesses that, they have an Instagram page, they post whatever, and then people comment on it, and then they don't take the time to respond or interact. Like, why are you just putting all this stuff out here? Like, that's your opportunity to build a relationship. So yeah, I don't know if you saw like all the focaccias I was doing, like it's something.
Oh, I loved them. Are you kidding me?
Since the quarantine thing. And I was sharing that recipe like all the time. I made sure that when I was doing it, that I was taking good notes, because it would be something that I would want to share with people, and making sure that every single person who wanted that recipe, I would send them links. I would talk them through it. I did some TikTok videos on making some of these things. I just enjoy the process of teaching people to be better cooks, but I think you're going to build long-term relationships with these people. And it's also fun. Like maybe they never become your customer, and that's okay too. It really doesn't take that much time.
Absolutely. In this world, that we're living in these days, it's, we need to find harmony somewhere. And, forever, ancient times, food has brought people together. And this is one of those opportunities where, when I was growing up, I was so blessed to be able to cook with my mom and my grandparents and my grandmother and my grandmothers and even my aunts and uncles, and got in the kitchen and worked. But unfortunately, these days, you don't see that happening a whole lot. And this sort of disaster, if you will, has maybe been a shining light to some other people. And a lot of people are they're learning new things that they never thought they would even be able to do. I don't even know how to boil water. Well, let's learn how to do it because you don't have anything else to do. So it's a great thing. I'm seeing a lot of kids cooking with their parents now. And thanks to Pinterest, there's a lot of people getting excited, hey, we can do this and we can do that with our kids. And I think that's a great thing.
And it'll be interesting to see if this changes the landscape of restaurants. There's been a lot of talk about, chefs are at home cooking, and maybe they've discovered that they don't need to be doing all these intricately plated dinners, that kind of a good home style meal there's some value in that, and that people want that. And what are customers going to be looking for when they return to dining? Are they going to be looking to go to that Michelin star restaurant and eating a 15-course meal? Or are they just going to want some soul satisfying, nourishing food? And I think it's going to kind of lean in that direction. And there's another guy, I was listening to a podcast and he was talking last week, and he was saying kind of the idea of restaurants almost are going to need to become that old style neighborhood restaurant to survive. Like if people aren't traveling anymore, you used to go to Noma, you'd get on a plane and you'd fly across the world to go there. And the only way these places sustained business was they had a global audience. And now if people aren't traveling, you have to become that restaurant that people in your city and your community support. And I think that's going to make a lot of restaurants either change or go out of business. If you are not dependent now on people coming from all over the world to visit your restaurant, what does your restaurant look like in your community? And something I take to heart for sure.
Absolutely. It just goes back to diversifying. When I opened Sin City Chefs back in 2007, we were in the middle of a recession, and people are like, "You're crazy." It's like, well, but if you notice, I didn't stick to just one thing. There was always something I would do. And to this day, that's always going to be the model. And whether it's a restaurant or it's a food truck or it's a catering company or it's a consulting company or whatever, you have to diversify what you're going to do if you want to succeed, especially right now.
So are you still doing spices and sauces and things like that?
Yes. So we're kind of stuck at the moment with spices. Unfortunately, the company that I originally had all my seasonings packaged sold a few years ago, and quality has been kind of slipping ever since. And so we're kind of in the middle of redoing that at the moment. And sauce, however, is ramping back up, and that's very exciting. We have a new one coming out, or it is actually already ready. We're just looking for an online source for it. We've got a couple stores here in Vegas that carry it. It's pretty exciting. And so we are definitely doing some of that.
That's really cool. I don't know what I would make. People always say, you should make some kind of sauce or spice. Like nothing comes off the top of my head, but it seems neat. Probably some kind of hot sauce or something. But I feel like the market's already flooded. I mean, it's terribly hard, in my opinion, to break into that market. Like, how do you set yourself apart from everyone else when there's already a million spices and barbecue sauces?
So just like everything else, you have to find the niche. I have a very good friend of mine. She has a fantastic blog. I'm just going to shout out for her. She's Girls Can Grill, and she's crushing it right now in the barbecue world. I mean, just crushing it. Anyway, so her niche is obviously in the name, Girls Can Grill. And so because of that, she could capitalize all she wants. And that's what's going to separate people from anymore. When I first started developing seasonings and sauces and everything else, barbecue as a corporate competition world, if you will, was just getting ramped up. And then mid 2000s or so, it started to turn like NASCAR style, where it was just like crazy big. And that's when absolutely everybody had their seasoning, had their sauces, has their glazes, has their marinades and everything. And everybody flooded the market. And you're still going to find that. But also, it's kind of like what's going on right now. Some companies are closing, but it's opening doors for others. Or it's, trust me when I say I don't want anybody to close. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But it's allowing new things to happen. And I think, when it comes to sauces and seasonings and marinades and anything else, it goes back to marketing and whatever you can do to kind of catch that niche. If you are blessed and you have a restaurant, well, then it's easy to just do a sauce or something, because you can put it on a shelf and people are like, hey, I just had that sauce on my ribs or whatever. And they're like, hey, I want to take some of that home so that I can enjoy the flavors. Or, hey, I'm not from town. Can I get this sauce, so that when I go home, I can share it with my friends and say, oh my gosh, these ribs are amazing because of the sauce or whatever. So there are ways to do it, but you're right. I think that it's extremely saturated. It's becoming harder and harder to get into bigger stores. The cost and the margins are just not good enough to be, just crushing it, unless you are very fortunate. And that opportunity is always there. I don't want to discourage anybody. I remember you may have gotten this when you were getting into culinary school. Oh, there's no money in this industry. No, there's a lot of money in this industry. It's just, how do you tap into it? And what do we need to do? And again, that just goes back to being adaptive and finding new ways to be creative.
So I do remember going to culinary school. They threw out this number of like $100,000, and I don't know a lot of people making $100,000 in this industry at all, let alone right out of culinary school. So Chopped, how many times have you been on Chopped now?
So I was on Chopped once. I was on Cutthroat Kitchen. I've been on Fire Masters. That's Fire Masters. If you're not familiar with, it started in Canada's Food Network Canada, and then it was picked up by the Cooking Channel here in the United States. So Masters and Cutthroat Kitchen, Chopped, 2 episodes of Carnival Eats, and an episode of Carnival Kings. So it's definitely something I love to do. If they called me tomorrow and said, hey, we want to come back for Champions, or we want you to have a redemption, or we want you to have, whatever show, I'm there, man.
Yeah, I asked you, the producers reached out to me and I said, is this something I should do? And you're like, definitely talk to them. It just seems, that's not how I feel. Like I like to cook, like the pressure. I don't know that I could do that. It just seems like so much.
So I have that story online as to my experience on Chopped, but I had no feeling in my right arm that day. And if you're watching the show, my hands are always crossed. I prayed the entire time because I literally had no feeling in my arm. I went to go grab a pan at one point and I had no strength whatsoever, and it slipped out of my hand. I grabbed it with my left hand before it touched the ground.
What was that? Was that like a pre-existing issue you had? So
I didn't know at the time, but after everything was all said and done, we flew back to Las Vegas. I went and got checked out, and I have a compressed disc in my neck. And the doctor said, did you break it when you were a kid? Did you break your collarbone? I was like, no, not that I'm aware of. But apparently I did. So, yeah, that's kind of how that went. But it was pretty awesome, man. 17 and a half hours it took to film that.
Whoa, that's a lot. That picked a weird day for your thing to manifest too, huh? Of all days.
Yeah, at 4 a.m. in the morning, I was pounding on the hotel room floor. I mean, man, I was in misery. And my wife's like, do you want to go to the ER? And I was like, no, the devil's trying to stop this from happening. I'm going. And
you pushed through.
I pushed all the way through, man.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's in the cards for me someday. I still don't know people all the time. And it's, not people in the industry, but like everyone's like, oh, you should go on one of those cooking shows. Like, I don't know. That's, I never really thought of doing that kind of thing. I did a local cooking competition. I felt like that was enough. We have the Mason-Dixon Master Chef tournament in Baltimore, and I've done that 3 times now with some chef friends, and that was fun.
I absolutely love it. Competition's been in my blood for a very, very long time. I would say, I think my first competition in food was when I was 8, and all through, junior high, high school, you name it. And then of course, my professional career, I generally don't stand down from a challenge. And if I get just destroyed, for lack of a better, phrase, I get back up and do it again. I recently told you kind of like this last weekend in the competition, barbecue competition, man, it was like we had one obstacle after another. It was one of the worst cooks I've ever had in my life in a barbecue competition. But we, again, just kept pushing through, and I kept leaning on God for that because I wasn't feeling it. I was like, this is not good. The food is not good. But, as they say in barbecue competitions, put the best thing you have in the box. And that's what we did. And we managed to get our name called a couple times. So, just like in life, if you get kicked down, you got to get back up and keep going. And that's what I love about competition. Every time I say, hey, I'm not going to do it again. No, I've been doing it my whole life. So I can't stop.
How many people are in a competition like that? Like this last one you did, how many other competitors are there?
So in the Kansas City Barbecue Society Pro competition, there were 32 teams. There was also an SCA state cook-off on Friday. There were a total of 72 teams in total for the whole weekend. So there was a lot. Every contest is different. So we've competed in some that there was only 15. We've competed in some that there's only 8. We've competed in some that there's 600. So, you don't know from one competition to the next.
Do you do anything with pastry anymore?
Very, very rarely.
Really?
I've just, I don't know what it was really that changed the switch. I think a lot of it had to do with, when I lost my weight, I just changed my focus. I still love it, still have a huge passion for it. If somebody said, hey, we want to offer you an executive pastry chef job, and it was worth it for me, then I would, and I prayed about it and God said, hey, this is what you need to do next. It would take me all of 30 seconds to get back in that mode. So, the passion's always been there. But I have to say that I love the diversity of just doing it all, man. If someone told me, hey, I need you to do a chocolate showpiece for me, I'd do it.
So was your weight issue totally related to pastry in your opinion? Like trying food and being around that? Is that?
No, it had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it at all. So shortly after culinary school, about a year after that, I got married to somebody that I met in culinary school. And we had a rough 5 years, not necessarily personally to each other, but we went through the death of a child, and it just seemed like 5 years of a constant struggle. And, pizza and the lifestyle of a chef, or the stereotypical, let's put it that way, the stereotypical lifestyle of a chef kind of set in, where I was just not eating correctly and having a couple of beers and that kind of thing. And, in 2005, when I literally I was taking a shower, and I was, one morning I opened up the curtain and I saw myself in the mirror, and I'm like, this has got to stop right now. And, I think, but most of the weight gain was stress. A lot of it was stress. And then I sat on my butt a lot, I didn't do anything. I worked my tail off, in the kitchen like we always do, but I wasn't very active anymore outside. And when I started to get more active, like I was saying before, how I would basically jog into work from where I was parked, the adrenaline started to get back up. I started to feel better. And, and that's just kind of how things started. And, but pastry didn't have anything to do with that. I love, to this day, I love pastries. I love desserts. My favorite thing in the whole world is cookie dough. And it can't be the stuff in the tube. It's got to be fresh. I have that every single weekend.
Chocolate chip?
Chocolate chunk every single weekend. I don't care if there's a pie or a cake or anything else at a party. I'm still having cookie dough that weekend. It's like, it's a little bit of an addiction. I'm not going to lie.
That's been really hard for me because I didn't go to school for pastry. We have in 4 years of culinary school, 2 sweet classes. That's it. And now with my business, I have to do all the desserts. I mean, I could buy them, but I hate that. What I love to do is make everything. So I've really had to teach myself some very basic dessert skills and then play to my strengths. And it gets really hard because sometimes someone will say, I want a key lime pie because it's my favorite. And it's like, okay, I have to have that conversation with myself. Like, I've never made one of these, but I'm a chef. I've made other pies. I'm sure I can read some recipes and figure it out. But, spending the past couple of years kind of developing some of my go-to desserts, that's been fun for me and interesting. But it's, it's tough because it's a whole different thing.
Well, for me, most of the people, I'm going to say most of the people nowadays that meet me don't have any clue that I know how to do desserts. And so when I do desserts, they're like, holy cow, where'd that come from? You're the barbecue guy.
For me, it was the flip side because I knew you as a pastry chef and we weren't, really close. Like I didn't really stay in contact with you after culinary school. And then, Facebook, you get reunited with everyone. It's like, oh, wow, that's Philip. Oh, he's not a pastry chef right now. He's doing barbecue. That's so interesting because I never would have guessed that at all.
Yep. It's kind of one of those things. From a very, very early age, I diversified from the very beginning. I mean, every time we had to have an elective in school, like even in science, I didn't take chemistry. I took nutritional science. I took foods for fitness. I took foods class, or, everything, something revolved around food the entire time. And when I went to a career tech center, I got certificates of culinary arts, and I had opportunities there, ice carving, and you name it. And then, of course, culinary school, yes, I got an associate's degree in baking and pastry. But at the end of the day, my mom, anytime my mom gets asked this question, she would always say, I always knew he was going to do it all, because that's my personality. I don't like to be stuck into one bubble, I guess. And so when the opportunity came to really kind of get out of that only pastry thing, then that I took it. And it's just great now because now I can teach it to people. I can, if people want desserts, I can do it. Again, I don't like to say no to anybody, but if I have to say no, I want to know the best route to take in order to make that customer happy. And sometimes that's just sucking it up and saying, I'm not the best at it. People always say, hey, what do you make? What's your specialty? And I said, everything except sushi. I'll let the sushi chefs take care of that.
Incidentally, I say the same thing because people will want a cooking class, and there's some things I do really well. There's some things that I think I can do well enough for a class. And then people who want sushi, that's a very specific thing. And I just say, I'm not the guy for that. Like I can maybe help you find someone, but sushi I feel is just like a whole different class of cooking. So did you always have that entrepreneurial spirit? I mean, I feel like a lot of us go to culinary school, and when we're there, we always say, everyone says, I want to own a restaurant. And then I think you get out and reality hits and you're like, well, I didn't realize it was going to be so much work and money. And then you don't. But did you always feel like you had that thing in you that was like, I am going to start a business?
So yes, when I was in kindergarten, I drew this little pamphlet of cookies. And I was like, anybody want to buy cookies? And they were 5 cents. And of course, it was just like a little toy. If it wasn't like real or anything. Although if somebody did give me a nickel, I would like to find that person today and give them 3 dozen cookies free, just because they never got their cookie. But it was somebody that gave me a nickel. And that was, again, I was 5. And then when I was 8, I started my own mowing business, and it was legit, man. I had a whole list of customers that I would push my mower to and everything else. And then I started selling cards, and so yes, long story short, absolutely. I've always sort of saw myself doing that. And I've tried to work for other people, in terms of businesses, and I like to work with people. I don't like to work for people. If that makes any sense.
No, it totally does. I mean, I actually had to leave my last job because I just felt like I couldn't be the person I wanted to be, or both personally and professionally working there. I mean, I worked at a job that from the outside, people would say was a good job, right? Like it was a good paying job. It was a respected job. I, did a lot of cool things, but I felt like I had bosses who were increasingly making me be more of an asshole. I couldn't be the human I wanted to be working there anymore, let alone the chef I wanted to be. And I wasn't able to be doing the food I really wanted to do. So yeah, I mean, I've worked for other people for 25 years or so. And, now I'm only kind of 4 years into doing it myself. And I can't imagine working for anyone ever again.
Yeah, it's, it does, it has its ups and downs, in this last situation, working for somebody else, you would be unable to collect unemployment easier, maybe. But, there's the whole retirement thing. So, as a business owner, you have to kind of find new ways to, build your retirement and so on. But
it's children. I have 2 children. I'm teaching them the hustle at a young age. I'm taking care of them now. They're going to take care of me when I'm old. That's my that's my plan. The retirement thing, I don't know. I'm hoping my children are going to take good care of me.
Well, I'll be honest. So when I was at a very young age, I told my parents that I would help them retire. And to this day, I am striving everything I can to do that. So to all those kids out there, your parents do a lot for you that you don't realize.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. My wife's parents live with us, and we love it. I mean, we have 3 generations in this house, and I think it's great. They get to be around their grandkids. They don't have to do as much around the house. It works really well for us, and we love having all 6 of us under one roof. But it's tough. Like I don't know that they could afford to live on their own anymore now based off of their retirement. So we're glad to take them in and share that, and hopefully my kids will see that and want to take us in. Yeah, because the food business is not a get rich business. I mean, I guess it can be, but it's tough. It is a struggle for sure, getting by and saving for retirement in the culinary world, I think.
The margins are so tight in this industry. There are ways to make more coin, but sometimes they're soul sucking. One of the most rewarding things of owning your own business, especially in your sense, the way that you have your business model, I love seeing people smile when they've consumed my food or when they've taken a class from me or something to that nature. In addition to that, I love to see the families grow. One of the things that I did not like about corporate anything is the fact that everybody literally becomes a number. And people need to get back to reality with numbers. We're all human, and we all need to love each other. We all need to love each other. And one of the things that's just so rewarding about owning your own business is being able to literally develop those relationships to the point where you can actually see these kids grow. You can, I had a client when I lived in Atlanta that I did their cakes for 5 years, and it's awesome. Did their wedding, did their child, did their bridal or their baby showers, and and then the baby was 1 and then 2 and 3. And it's just seeing the community grow. I did a video a while back where I was telling everybody always wants to know, hey, what's the best grill? What's the best smoker? And the first thing I said is the one that you can buy from your neighbor, or the one that you can buy from a store of somebody in your community that you can see that family grow. Because let's face it, man, if we don't do that, then what are we all living here for?
That's the nice thing. My meals are at a higher price point, which means it tends to be more of a special occasion. So almost every time I go out, it's a birthday, it's an anniversary, it's Father's Day, it's a bridal shower, it's a baby shower. I mean, not that I don't just do random date nights, but these people are sharing some of their most special moments of their life and having me be a part of that. And then, most chefs don't get to even experience that. You're in the kitchen and it's like a hostess and the front of the house staff. I'm there, I'm serving these people. So to be part of someone's bridal shower, that's really cool. Or, all these things, I love it. And I, like you said, getting to see the look on their faces, you're serving them food and hopefully serving them something that they really get excited about, maybe something they've never had before. I mean, that is just the best.
I completely agree with you. I was very honored to be asked to cook for some people that I've known for a while. They love to dine. They're foodies all the way, and but they love to, they go to these really nice restaurants, but they had never had a personal chef experience. And I call them Epicurean experiences. And so we did 9 courses, and it was every sense, all of your senses, or all of their senses, were used to enjoy that meal. And it was a totally Epicurean experience for them. And they were blown away by that, that thing. And it was just something that they didn't even realize could be, if you will. And it's so rewarding. Like I said, every time I get tired, as chefs, this industry is really rough on you, man. Both physically, mentally, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's still in your heart, then you just keep going. you just keep going. And giving people those experiences is like nothing else, man.
Some people think it's strange. I've actually become good friends with many of my customers. We'll go out and get beers or hang out. I'm in their house for 4 to 5 hours, for the time. I usually get there about 2 hours before dinner even starts. And then you're hanging out and you get to know them. And it's amazing how many people then follow me on Instagram or send me a friend request on Facebook, not just follow the business page, but me personally. So then you're seeing their whole life of their children and all their things they're doing. And I like that, really building a connection with them and feeling like they're true friends. So some of my closest friends have actually come out of being paying customers for me instead of, starting out as friends that I was cooking for.
I have the same story. I to this day, I could call some people from, when I lived in Michigan and, and people that have just continued to follow me and how much they miss my food, or maybe they lived in Vegas when I first started Sin City Chefs and now they live, in Palm Springs, or they live, in Idaho or wherever. They're like, oh, we miss your food. And I always kind of tell them, hey, there's a jet, I can fly, I can come to you, but it just means a lot,
Yeah, that's what keeps me going. Sounds like that's what keeps you going.
Definitely. Something else that, I had the opportunity to teach high school students, and some of them had no direction whatsoever. And one in particular, well, many, obviously, actually, I don't want to single anybody out, but to see the look on their faces, to see themselves succeed and to actually do something that they put their heart and mind into, was probably the number one most rewarding thing I've ever seen in my life. To see some of these students that were destined to drop out, now some of them work for Win. Now some of them are traveling the country or even the world doing what they love, and that's cooking. And as a chef, as a role model, as a whatever you want to say, I want people to succeed. If you're trying to live a healthier lifestyle, then I can help you do that through food or just talking to you, or, change your mindset a little bit. I always say that if you want to change your waist, you got to change your mind first. If you're a chef and you're in a rut, there are ways to get out of that rut. I have a very, very good friend that you even know that has an extremely successful restaurant and rated one of the best breakfast restaurants in the nation. And I wish that he could find the spark back again. He's kind of lost it. And it's sad for me to see, because I remember what it used to be. And I don't ever in my life want to do that. I have another barbecue friend of mine. He saw I was kind of in that same area about 1.5 years ago, and he kind of took his arm around me and was like, dude, you're too talented and you have too much passion for this. Don't let the industry get to you. Just come back at it in a different way. And so I did. And I think we all need to do that at some time. And whether you're a chef, you're in the food industry, or you're in any other industry, sometimes you just got to take a quick step back and find a different perspective.
And I think a lot of people are doing that right now. I mean, even myself, it felt good to kind of pull myself out of the day-to-day grind, because you get caught up. The challenge I find is when you're building a business, you want to get there. And then you might think you get there, and then you're so busy that you stop building, right? Like I started my job on the side. So it's like, I'm building to this. I need more customers. I'm getting there. And then you're there, and then you're in the weeds 24/7. And then the things that got you there, like I was communicating more with my customers. I was doing more blogging, whatever I was doing, working on the business end. And then like you can barely keep alive. Like you have the business that you've hoped for so long. And then just everything else starts to fall apart because now you're in over your head. And this was like, okay, we got to stop everything. Okay, let me refocus. I need to work on some new menus. I need to think about how my marketing needs to change. I need to develop new recipes, like all these things. And yes, I didn't want to be unemployed, obviously, but it was a nice break in the sense that it gave me time to refocus on the business and kind of look at what I was happy with and look at what I wasn't, and then kind of shift a little bit. I'm going to come back still doing my business, but I'm making some adjustments, not just due to COVID, but just things that I was able to reflect on that I don't think I was able to think about when I was in the thick of it.
Well, and sometimes during those times, you actually find what you actually have more passion for than you originally did. I found also that I'm very good at certain things that I didn't know I was good at. And it's all a learning process. The entire thing is a learning process. And then, we're not getting any younger. So I've been in the industry 31 years. I'm in my 31st year right now. So most people would be retiring after 30 years. And I'm probably at least 20 off before I can even think about that. So
I just did a quick count on my fingers. I think I'm 27 years.
Right. It's like, wow, where did those years go? But then you look back and you're like, I've done a lot in those years, and it's a very successful businessman. In fact, he's a client of mine. He once told me one of the biggest keys to success is find a way to replace yourself. So bringing up the people below you to help them succeed and carry that torch is fairly vital.
That's something I need to work on.
I think we all do, to be honest with you. We all want to we want to oversee everything all the time. We were talking about earlier how we didn't want to be that chef that wasn't cooking anymore. And even when we were in culinary school, I said I didn't want to be the chef carrying the clipboard all the time. I wanted to be, getting in the weeds with my staff or my cooks. And ironically, though, the cooks don't actually want you there. You make them nervous, even if you're not trying to. And I don't know about you, but I like to try to have some fun when I'm cooking, especially for cranking. I mean, I remember having the food truck, seeing that line that was a half a mile long. Man, there's no bigger rush than that, is to see that line going, holy crap, strap it on, baby.
The nice thing about having your own business is that you can then delegate the stuff that you don't want to do. When you're working for someone else, now it's like, if I am not good at the books or the marketing or the whatever, I can continue to be the chef cooking and hire an accountant or hire a marketing person. When you're working for someone and you're the chef, the expectation usually from the general manager is that you're going to do that admin stuff. When you have your own solo business, you can say, well, like, maybe my strength isn't the organization end of doing the paperwork, and I'll just hire someone to do that instead of hiring a sous chef to do the cooking. So trying to figure that out and let some stuff go. It's always tough,
I completely 100% agree with that.
Learning as you go. One of the big things is everyone says, like, how do you grow? How do you scale? It's like, why are you so worried about my business? Don't worry about it if I'm happy. I think people always want to say, well, but you got to hire more chefs. You got to stop cooking and have them do that. It's like, but that's not the point of what I want to be doing. Don't worry about my business. I'll hire someone to do the books, and then I'll just go cook every day.
Every decision you make has some sort of consequence. It can either be a good one or a bad one. And sometimes, like you and I were talking about earlier, when we were talking about like the price point, if you scale down your price point and you need more volume, that opens up more problems. The problems become more time consuming. And in this industry and in pretty much any business, any business, time is the most expensive thing you have to deal with. And that is the one key ingredient that most people don't think about. And unfortunately, they're the customers.
So is there anything you'd like to leave our guests with before we get out of here today?
Well, usually I have some sort of quirky thing to say. I'm trying to think, usually I have that, final tagline, if you will. But the biggest one that I have for everybody is to stay positive, love on each other, and always remember that if we may not get along in the world politically, we can all get together at the same table.
I love it. We've been talking about that so much recently. So I'm glad that you shared that with everyone, because I feel the exact same way. So to all of our listeners, this has been the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. As always, you can find us at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org and on all social media. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Phil. And I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show or sponsoring a show, please let us know. We can be reached at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.